I was scrolling through the news feed the other day, and I saw this post from Howard Lutnick, the U.S. Commerce Secretary.
Oh, yeah?
And it didn't feel like a standard press release. It was more like a victory lap.
Right.
He was practically shouting from the rooftops, calling this New Deal in Tennessee a major victory. The language was so intense, rebuilding the industrial base, strengthening national security.
Ending dependence, I saw that one.
Exactly, ending dependence. And to hear him tell it, this new $743 million metal smelter in Clarksville isn't just a factory.
It's a strategic asset.
It's the new front line of defense.
Right.
He even reeled off this list of minerals: gallium, germanium, indium, antimony.
Stuff you absolutely need for fighter jets, for satellites, for AI.
Yeah. All the things the U.S. has been struggling to get its hands on domestically for decades. So on the surface, it's this perfect America First story.
Mm-hmm. A dormant industry in a red state suddenly roaring back to life.
Yeah. Promising, over 700 high-paying jobs, securing the future of high-tech manufacturing. But then you start to dig just a little bit deeper.
And the picture gets a lot more complicated.
A lot more. Because while the administration is selling this as a huge domestic win, all the muscle, all the money, it's coming from a South Korean giant, Korea's Zinc.
And they didn't just get lucky.
No, not at all. They played this incredibly sophisticated game, hired these top-tier D.C. lobbyists with direct lines right into the White House, the kind of people who, know exactly how to work the system.
The big customers, as they're called.
So it creates this really fascinating contradiction. You've got a foreign company being positioned as the main guardian of American national security.
And using all the right language, the common values rhetoric, to secure hundreds of millions in U.S. subsidies.
Right. Which leaves you with this big question. Is this really the triumphant return of American industrial might? Or is it just a masterclass in how global players are learning to perfectly mirror the political rhetoric of the moment to win big in the U.S.?
I think it's a bit of both, and that's what makes it so interesting.
Okay, so let's really unpack this. That whole idea, a foreign company being hailed as a guardian of American national security, we have to do a deep dive on that.
Absolutely.
Our mission today is to get past that victory lap and really analyze the three big layers of this deal. We're going to look at the urgent national security reason that made this whole thing necessary.
Then the money. The staggering, $7.4 billion financial architecture behind it.
And finally, the really sophisticated political game that made it all happen. We want to figure out what a victory like this really costs, what kind of precedent it sets, and, who really wins when national security becomes the main driver of private investment.
Well, you said it. This is a textbook case of 21st century industrial policy. The U.S. government isn't just, sitting back and offering a few incentives.
No, this is active.
They're taking equity stakes, they're providing massive loans, they're using political muscle to strategically reverse decades of globalization that, frankly, left key sectors completely exposed.
So this isn't just about building a factory.
No, not at all. This project is about drawing a line in the sand, especially against rivals like China that completely dominate the mineral processing world.
All right, let's start right there on that geopolitical front line. Why have critical minerals, all of a sudden it seems, jump to the very top of the national security list? Why does it warrant this huge subsidized approach?
Well, it's not really all of a sudden. It's more like the culmination of decades of, let's call it strategic neglect.
Neglect.
For 50 years, the U.S. just let its ability to process these minerals wither away. The assumption was that, global markets would always be stable and open.
Which turned out to be a really bad assumption.
A profoundly dangerous one. It created this huge national vulnerability. Most of these high-tech metal supply chains are concentrated in just a few places. And critically, China dominates the refining and processing part of it.
Right.
Even when the raw ore is mined somewhere else.
Right. The choke point isn't the mine, it's the refinery.
Exactly. So when the early 2020s hit, with all the supply chain bottlenecks and rising geopolitical tensions, the government had this wake-up call. They realized this dependency wasn't just some economic problem. It was an existential security risk.
And so the Korea Zinc project gets framed as the immediate fix, the silver bullet for rebuilding the industrial base and ending dependence.
And the scale of what they're trying to reverse is it's sobering. I think Deputy Secretary of War Steve Feinberg pointed this out.
What did he say?
He said this facility in Clarksville is the first U.S.-based zinc smelter and critical minerals processing plant built since the 1970s.
The 70s, that's astounding.
It is. Just think about that fact for a second. The entire apparatus of American defense, of high-tech manufacturing, has been operating without any domestic processing resilience for half a century.
Wow.
So if you want to reverse 5 decades of industrial decline, you need exactly this kind of massive, targeted, government-led approach. There's really no other way.
To really get a handle on the stakes here, I think we need to move past the general term critical minerals and look at what this plant is actually going to produce.
Yeah, the specifics matter.
It's designed to process 1.1 million tons of raw materials every year. That will yield about 540,000 tons of finished products, including 13 critical and strategic minerals.
And that comprehensive list, that's the whole ballgame. That's the strategic objective. Sure, it provides basic industrial metals like zinc, lead, and copper. It gives you precious metals like gold and silver.
But that's not the main prize.
No. The true national security value is in the specialized stuff. The gallium, the germanium, the indium, antimony, bismuth, tellurium, cadmium, and palladium.
Okay, I have to stop you there.
Right.
Because for most people listening, myself included, that just sounds like a list from a high school chemistry textbook. We need to spend some time on these. Why are they so vital for defense and tech?
They are the quiet, invisible backbone of modern power. Let's take gallium, for example.
Okay, gallium.
It's absolutely crucial for high-performance semiconductor components. We're talking about the chips in 5G infrastructure and the advanced radar systems our military uses.
So if you want a radar that can spot a stealth aircraft,
You need gallium. If you want a communications satellite that doesn't have a huge delay, you need gallium. And it's a similar story for germanium.
where is that used?
Germanium is vital for fiber optic communications. That's what powers, the entire global internet, our data centers, secure military networks. And it's also essential for advanced infrared optics.
So night vision, missile guidance systems.
Exactly. We're talking about core military and intelligence infrastructure, the kind of stuff you can't afford to have a supply chain disruption for.
Yeah. Okay, so that's 2 down. What about some of the others? Indium, antimony.
Indium is used in highly sensitive sensors and specialized displays. Think about the screen in a fighter jet cockpit. That's indium.
Right.
Antimony is used as a flame retardant, but it's also a key hardening agent in specialized alloys for things like ammunition and batteries.
Or tellurium.
Tellurium is essential for high-efficiency solar cells and advanced thermal imaging devices. So the whole list, it covers the entire spectrum of modern warfare and economic competition.
Aha.
Everything from a resilient power grid to AI chips to quantum computing components.
That makes the urgency just crystal clear. So this production, like Secretary Litnick said, supports everything from fighter jets and satellites to semiconductor factories and power grids. But this deal isn't just about building the factory itself. It's about guaranteeing access to what it produces.
Precisely. And this is key. The U.S. government didn't just write a check and hope for the best. They structured the deal to get significant binding security guarantees.
Like what?
First, the U.S. gets preferred access to a portion of Korea Zinc's expanded production in South Korea. So that means we get dibs on output from their massive existing facilities over there.
So it's not just about the new plant.
Not at all. And even more decisively, the U.S. will have priority access to the company's entire global production starting in 2026.
Okay, that's a huge deal. So we're not just securing the output from Tennessee. We're leveraging this one investment to get priority access to the entire global output of a world leader in this space.
Yes, that's what shifts this from being a simple commercial deal to a full-blown defense industrial arrangement.
The Department of War is clearly flexing its financial muscle here to lock down a resource that they've called a force multiplier.
And that's exactly where you hit the central tension in all the rhetoric.
How so?
The political messaging is all about ending dependence. But the reality is we're just replacing one kind of dependence on an unstable source, like China.
With a highly managed strategic dependence on a key ally, South Korea.
Right. And bizarrely, on the U.S. government's own ability to manage a commercial business, the Department of War is betting $1.4 billion that this managed dependence is less risky than the old way of just relying on the open global market.
And if that bet pays off, You'd expect the feeling of relief to ripple all the way down to the people on the ground on the logistical level.
It should.
And this is where the story of that logistics specialist, Elias, really helps connect the dots from the big strategy to the tactical reality.
Yeah, that micro-level experience just confirms why the macro strategy was so necessary. For Elias, who's a logistics specialist out in East Tennessee, the constant threat wasn't, some enemy missile. It was supply chain failure.
Right.
He spent the early 2020s navigating what he calls supply chain nightmares. Just watching critical defense manufacturing lines slow down or even stop completely because the necessary refined materials were stuck on a boat overseas.
That must have been incredibly frustrating. I mean, we can talk about geopolitics in these abstract terms, but for a guy like Elias, this was a tactical failure caused by a fundamental industrial weakness.
Exactly. So for him, the announcement of this huge smelter in Clarksville, processing the very heart of the tech right there in his own state, must have felt like a direct operational improvement.
Like reinforcements arriving.
It translates that abstract goal of critical mineral security into real operational certainty. When the Department of War calls reliable access a force multiplier, they're talking about empowering people like Elias.
So the whole policy goal is to eliminate that tactical risk. The risk that one day a supply choke point means a fighter jet or a satellite is just grounded because you can't get one tiny specialized component.
That's the nightmare scenario they're trying to prevent.
So that level of relief Elias describes, that feeling of reclaiming the iron shield of defense manufacturing,
yeah.
How effective is that kind of language at neutralizing the legitimate criticisms about the massive subsidies involved here?
Oh, it's incredibly effective. And this is absolutely crucial to the political framing of the deal.
Go on.
When you frame industrial policy as national defense, the argument completely shifts from economic efficiency to basically survival.
It's no longer a business decision.
It provides this moral, patriotic justification for spending that would otherwise be politically toxic. The moment this factory is linked to fighter jets and satellites, the public debate moves right past quilters of taxpayer risk or corporate welfare and lands squarely on American security. It's strategic communication just as much as it is industrial planning.
And that security certainly did open up the federal coffers. Let's shift gears now and talk about the financial architecture, because the scale of this investment is just, it's staggering.
It really is. A total planned investment of $7.4 billion. That includes $6.6 billion in capital expenditures.
And for a state like Tennessee, that number is monumental.
It's the largest single private corporate investment in the state's entire history. It's even bigger than that Ford Blue Oval City project near Memphis that got so much attention.
It immediately puts Clarksville right at the epicenter of this new industrial revival.
It does. But we have to put a giant asterisk next to that phrase, private corporate investment.
Right. Because when you look at the financial structure, you see this deep, really unprecedented level of U.S. government integration. The joint venture is called Crucible JV LLC, but the U.S. government is a major equity partner.
This, for me, is the most fascinating and complex layer of the whole thing. The Department of War is holding a 40% stake in the venture.
40%.
Backed by a conditional investment of $1.4 billion. This isn't a grant. It's not a tax break. This is the U.S. military, through its financial arms, becoming a part owner of a commercial mineral processing plant.
That sets a huge precedent.
A massive one.
Let's clarify what conditional investment actually means here, because $1.4 billion is not a small condition.
No. A conditional investment means the funding is released in stages. It's tied to hitting specific performance-based milestones.
Like what?
Things like securing the rest of the overall loan package, ensuring the facility meets its capacity goals on time, meeting certain defense readiness standards.
So it minimizes the immediate risk to the taxpayer.
Compared to an outright grant, yes. But what it does is it locks the Department of War into a long-term commercial relationship. They are essentially treating refined minerals as a strategic asset class that's worthy of equity ownership.
They're guaranteeing a market for the product.
They're guaranteeing a market which de-risks the entire project for the foreign investor, Korea Zinc.
And when you look at the rest of the financing, the public backing is just overwhelming.
It is. The project is heavily financed by $4.7 billion in U.S. government loans.
$4.7 billion.
On top of that, you have a $210 million subsidy from the Department of Commerce, which they specifically tied to the Cheech-FPS Act.
So let's just summarize that structure for a second. Korea Zinc is selling about $1.9 billion in shares to U.S. investors.
Right, which is a relatively small piece of the pie.
And the rest, well over $6 billion, is financed, backed, or directly provided by the U.S. government.
So this is not a foreign company simply deciding to invest in America. This is a state-driven industrial policy mandate that's using a foreign ally as the sort of technical implementation partner.
And the big financial players are following the government's lead. JP Morgan Chase advised on the deal and helped finance it under its new $1.5 trillion Security and Resiliency Initiative.
And that 1.5 trillion number, that isn't just a marketing slogan.
It sounds like one.
It sounds like one, but it's not. It's a staggering commitment. And it signals this fundamental shift within private finance. They recognize that government mandates, especially when they're tied to defense and critical infrastructure like this,
they're a safe bet.
They create stable, predictable, and highly profitable investment opportunities. They're aligning their capital strategy directly with the government's geopolitical strategy. Economic security has officially become a trillion-dollar asset class because the government is basically backstopping all the risk.
Okay, so let's talk about where all this money is going. The targeted placement in a red state, specifically Tennessee. What are the tangible benefits that were promised to the Clarksville region?
The immediate local impact is the creation of 740 total direct jobs.
Okay.
That breaks down to 420 new jobs in Clarksville itself, plus another 320 jobs that are either retained or new at the Gordonsville mine, which is reopening as part of this.
And that's a crucial detail. They're not just building a new processing plant, they're revitalizing an existing domestic mining operation at the same time.
It's a fully integrated strategy.
And the quality of these jobs is really key. We're not talking about minimum wage here.
No, not at all. The local Economic Development Council reported that these are high-wage jobs with salaries ranging from $83,000 a year up to nearly $200,000.
$196,000. That completely resets the wage expectations for the entire local labor market.
And when you factor in the multiplier effect, the spin-off jobs for suppliers, contractors, local restaurants and services, the total employment impact is estimated to be close to 1,500 positions.
That's transformative.
For a region that is often felt left behind by the modern economy, yes, it's absolutely transformative.
Now, to land a deal of this size, the local governments had to offer some pretty substantial incentives of their own.
They did.
The Clarksville-Montgomery County Industrial Development Board approved what's called a Tier 5 20-year pilot agreement. So for anyone listening, we should probably explain what a pilot is and why they can be controversial.
A pilot is a payment in lieu of taxes. Essentially, it means that instead of paying the standard property tax right away on their new multi-billion-dollar facility, Korea Zinc gets a phased, heavily reduced tax deal for 2 decades.
And in exchange?
In exchange, they commit to the investment and the job creation targets. The local officials, of course, justify this by arguing that without the incentive, the investment would just go somewhere else and they'd get zero new revenue.
And the local officials are defending this pilot pretty aggressively. They argue the infrastructure it generates will lead to a $288.6 million net benefit to the county over 20 years.
Including $78 million specifically for the local school system.
But that's the projection. That's the best case scenario. What's the risk here?
That's the critical question, isn't it? The $288 million benefit only happens if all 740 of those high-wage jobs are created and, crucially, retained for the full 20 years of the agreement.
Which is a long time.
A very long time. The risk is that the county commits to all this new infrastructure and services based on those projections, but then something changes. Geopolitical winds shift, or the company itself faces, corporate upheaval, which we know is a possibility here, and they pull out early.
Then the county is left holding the bag.
They're left with stranded infrastructure and a massive hole in their tax revenue. It's a high-risk, high-reward proposition. Potentially massive reward, but it is not guaranteed.
They must have had a really compelling reason to pick Clarksville, though, beyond just the political leverage of it being in a red state.
No, they did. Clarksville offered a decisive competitive advantage, and it all came down to logistics.
Infrastructure.
The specific site on Moore Road has multimodal transportation capability. That's essential when you're planning to move 1.1 million tons of material in and out every year.
So what does that mean, multimodal?
It means they have direct rail access right to the site, and they also have barge capability on the Cumberland River. That allows for high-volume, low-cost transport which is a necessity for a world-class integrated smelting operation like this.
And that huge economic investment, combined with the promise of stability, that's what turns this deal into a human victory on the ground. Which brings us to the story of Clara, the diner owner.
Clara's story is exactly why this kind of policy is so politically powerful. She runs a diner near the new construction site in a town that felt like it had been completely abandoned by the old manufacturing economy.
Right, a story we hear a lot, decades of decline, a real sense of vulnerability.
And then she hears that billions of dollars and hundreds of high-paying jobs are coming. She doesn't see foreign capital or government subsidies. She sees her son.
Her son, who is thinking about moving away for work, California, maybe somewhere else.
And he decides to stay home. He can now get a job as a specialized technician in a strategic high-tech industry right there in his hometown.
That decision, the son staying home, that's the core human impact, isn't it?
It is. It's about resuscitating the dignity of the local workforce. We can, and we should, debate the subsidies and the risks. But for Clara and her family, this government-backed foreign investment is a tangible win. It's a good paycheck and a long-term future without being forced to move away.
That said, it is fair to look at that outcome and ask if this revival is actually sustainable. Or is it just a temporary boom fueled by a massive short-term injection of government cash? Is that job security entirely dependent on the continuation of that $4.7 billion in government-backed loans?
That's the fundamental tension. These jobs are high-tech, they're high-wage, but the demand for them is, in a way, artificial. It's driven by a national security mandate, not by pure market forces.
The project only exists because the government said it had to.
The U.S. government mandated it, financed it, and took an equity stake to de-risk it. If that commitment ever wanes, if a future administration shifts its priorities, the stability that underpins the whole thing could just evaporate.
So for the community, the key question is permanence.
It's whether the infrastructure and the skilled labor force they develop here can actually sustain themselves, even if the Department of War decides it doesn't need to be a 40% owner 2 decades from now.
It just perfectly illustrates why this kind of strategic investment is so politically potent in these targeted regions. The economic impact is immediate, it's highly visible, and it's deeply personal, and that tends to neutralize a lot of the policy criticism.
And that powerful political resonance, as you said, is not an accident, which means we have to look at the political attribution, how this very complex alliance was packaged and sold as a specific political victory for the current administration.
The political claim is it's absolute and it's completely centralized. Commerce Secretary Lutnick framed it as a transformational deal for America. He called it a big win for America.
Right.
And he made sure to explicitly congratulate President Trump for signing the contract and, quote, putting U.S. security first. He posted that this is exactly how you manage strategic competition.
And he wasn't alone. Deputy Secretary of War Steve Feinberg reinforced that message, stating explicitly that the project was directed by the president to prioritize defense and economic security.
And then the White House Deputy Press Secretary, Kush Desai, he completed the trifecta, saying the administration would continue to leverage every tool at our disposal to end America's foreign dependence.
So the political branding is completely uniform. The message is, this industrial revival is a direct result of our administration's security first, America first policy.
But the reality, of course, is that to secure all this funding and these critical contracts, Korea Zinc had to engage in a lobbying masterclass.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that this project lands in a key red state, and specifically in the district of Senator Bill Hagerty, who's a known administration ally, that is not a coincidence.
No, this is where you see the really sophisticated political game being played. Korea Zinc hired the absolute biggest players in the Washington influence market to make sure their proposal was perfectly tailored to the political moment.
Who did they hire?
They brought on Ballard Partners, a firm that's famous for its direct personal connections to President Trump, and they hired Mercury Public Affairs, which notably employed the former White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles.
Okay, so you hire these big customers, as they say. How does that actually translate a proposal for a multi-billion-dollar smelter into an approved national security project? What was the lobbying strategy?
It's all about bypassing the traditional bureaucracy and appealing directly to the stated goals of the highest level decision makers.
So they're not arguing about zinc futures in some subcommittee meeting?
Not at all. Ballard and Mercury were selling national resilience. They framed the dependency on China as the single most urgent national security threat. Then, by presenting Korea Zinc as the ideal, technologically superior ally who was willing to spend billions to solve this American vulnerability.
It made it an easy yes.
They made the case that funding this project was the fastest, most effective way to enact the president's own America First agenda in the critical mineral space. They brilliantly linked foreign investment directly to domestic security.
Which highlights this new reality, right? If you're a foreign corporation and you want billions in U.S. government backing, you don't just need lobbyists who know their way around Washington.
No.
You need people with direct personal communication lines to the executive branch who can speak the preferred political dialect of the moment.
And crucially, that sophisticated maneuvering allowed the administration to manage the inherent contradiction between America First and, well, Ally First.
Right. How do you square that circle?
You position the deal as strengthening the U.S. ROK economic security cooperation. You frame this reliance on Seoul as a good thing, as global supply chain diversification. So they're effectively saying, we are ending our dependence on our adversaries by deepening our dependence on trusted allies.
And that shared values narrative gets reinforced heavily at the state level. I saw Tennessee Governor Bill Lee emphasize the partnership is built on innovation, manufacturing excellence, and shared values. And it's important to note, this isn't some isolated incident. South Korea has become Tennessee's #1 international investment partner since 2019. We're talking $7.2 billion in capital invested.
So this is a deliberate state-led strategy of aligning with a specific key ally. But underneath that neat narrative of a unified strategic alliance, there's this fascinating layer of internal corporate drama at Korea Zinc itself.
Right, and that adds a whole new layer of complexity to this partnership.
A significant one.
This entire project is moving forward while Korea Zinc is basically embroiled in a hostile ownership dispute.
Their biggest shareholder, Youngkoong Corp, is publicly arguing that this whole $7.4 billion U.S. smelter plan is really designed to shore up the CEO, Yoon-bi Choi's, management control, not just to serve the company's business interests.
That detail is pivotal. It really is, because it shows you the multi-layered incentives that are at play here.
Exactly. You have this massive national security partnership aimed at U.S. domestic resilience, backed by the Department of War.
And it's simultaneously being used as a strategic defense mechanism in a private, high-stakes Korean corporate battle.
The U.S. government's desperate need for industrial capacity provides the CEO with the perfect government-backed mega project he needs to defend his job against a hostile shareholder.
It forces you to ask, what's the primary driver here? Is it U.S. security? Or is it Korean corporate survival?
And the answer is probably both, and they're completely inextricably linked.
And the final irony in this whole system is the human collaboration that's required to actually make the smelter work. And it runs directly counter to all the fierce nationalistic slogans.
It really does.
The future of this high-tech operation rests entirely on building a bridge between South Korean expertise and American labor.
And we can see this perfectly through the eyes of someone like Jinwoo, the relocating engineer from Seoul.
Yeah, try to put yourself in Jinwoo's shoes for a minute. He's a senior engineer from Seoul. He moves his life to Clarksville, Tennessee, to implement this incredibly specialized smelting technology.
His whole job is to bridge that tech gap between the world-leading expertise they use at Korea Zinc's massive Onsan smelter and the American workforce that's going to operate this new Tennessee plant.
He is the literal personification of the irony here. The project is publicly credited to the Trump administration's policies and the ideal of America first.
And yet, its core technical success hinges entirely on South Korean technology transfer and management.
Jinwoo's experience just highlights that necessary contradiction. He has to navigate a culture where the political rhetoric is all about total independence, yet his daily reality is one of deep practical dependence on international collaboration.
The only way the U.S. can quickly and effectively reverse 50 years of industrial decline is by importing the operational blueprint and the expertise from a world leader. And that world leader happens to be South Korea.
So when the politicians are on stage claiming a victory for American might, the reality on the factory floor is that success depends on Jinwoo making sure the American labor force can master this sophisticated technology that's based on a design from Onsan, Korea.
It's an America-first industrial policy that is utterly dependent on an ally-first technological partnership.
It really just demonstrates that the most effective form of strategic competition in this era isn't isolation.
No, it's the highly subsidized collaborative alliance.
Yeah.
We can't build the future alone, and the technical complexity of this sector, pretty much guarantees that our reliance on trusted partners like Jinwoo and Korea Zinc is permanent.
We started this deep dive analyzing a political victory lap from the Commerce Secretary. Now that we've unpacked the geopolitical vulnerability, the massive $7.4 billion hybrid financial structure, and the really complex political maneuvering, what's the synthesis? What's the core takeaway for you, the listener, from this new template for industrial policy?
I think the core takeaway is that this Korea Zinc investment is the definitive blueprint for how global geopolitical competition is fought now. It's not a simple story of a domestic victory or, foreign dominance. It's a story of strategic alignment.
Right.
The U.S. government needed industrial capacity, and they needed it fast to counter external threats. Korea Zinc was the willing and capable partner, but only if they could successfully navigate the political landscape and secure that massive federal backing.
It's the ultimate hybrid model. It just cements this profound blurring of the lines between national security and private profit.
Absolutely.
You have the Department of War holding a 40% equity stake, literally treating industrial capacity as a military asset that's funded by conditional investments.
And at the exact same time, you have private finance giants like J.P. Morgan funneling $1.5 trillion into resiliency, because they see that these security mandates create incredibly reliable asset classes.
So the future American industrial base, it's not purely government-owned or purely private.
No, it's a permanent, deeply intertwined hybrid entity.
Okay.
And it's driven primarily by these federal security mandates.
We've detailed the pretty significant financial costs and the political capital that was invested in this industrial resurgence in Tennessee. We've highlighted both the huge economic benefits and the very real taxpayer risks that come with things like that pilot structure.
The critical lesson this deep dive really reveals is not just that America is rebuilding its industrial might, it's how it's doing it. And this resurgence is being achieved through a strategic, heavily subsidized dependence on allies and institutional finance. What we are witnessing is the permanent blurring of lines, where national security policy, armed with billions in federal loans and subsidies, becomes the single largest and most powerful driver of state and regional economic development in targeted states like Tennessee.